A new horror film is out in theaters, and it has been the topic of much discussion. It premiered a few weeks ago, I believe, at the South by Southwest Film Festival, and it has had a rapturous hit by the horror fans, the horror community. And since then, it's kind of just become the sensation. It's ended up grossing a lot of money its opening weekend. It continues a much beloved cult franchise, and it is maybe the bloodiest movie. It is the bloodiest studio movie that I have ever seen. Warner Brothers released this movie. It's pretty shocking. It is the fifth installment within this specific franchise that was led by Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, starting back in 1981, followed by Evil Dead 2, followed by Army of Darkness, The Evil Dead, which was a kind of reboot, and this follows up in the vein. And this movie is Evil Dead Rise. I got to see it a few days ago, and I have some thoughts. So, Evil Dead Rise. The premise itself is very simple. We are with this family, a mom, the sister, and the three kids. When one of the kids uncovers the Book of the Dead and summons the Deadites, it ends up possessing their mom, and the mom tries to kill the whole family. That is the premise of Evil Dead Rise. You don't have to care much about this premise. It's a pretty traditional horror premise, and that's not what matters. What matters is Evil Dead Rise, the horror of it. And let me tell you, this movie is freaky. This movie is legitimately very frightening, very intense. There are some extreme, brutalistic, almost cruel kills in this film. There is some disgusting imagery in this film. There is one scene involving a tattoo gun that it's shown briefly in the trailers. Let me tell you, that scene is horrific. There are so many scenes in this film that I had to close my eyes. I felt sick multiple times watching this movie. Legitimately, there is some such disturbing, visceral imagery that I just couldn't watch the screen. It was so intense for me to handle. And I kind of dug this film a lot. I really liked Evil Dead Rise. And I think where this film succeeds is it's able to do what Sam Raimi does so well with the original Evil Dead trilogy. And that is, it is a legitimately scary film that also has a wickedly dark sense of humor. It is so over the top in its blood, and yet that is all in good fun within this film, and it's also deeply disturbing and demonic and sadistic in some way. And this film almost feels voyeuristic in the sense that you're watching something that you shouldn't be watching. It's just so violent and so unsettling, and it at times feels really real. There's like a few kills in this movie where you're just like, oh my God, that's just like too much. Like, can you even do that in a film? And to be honest, that's what I liked about this film. I liked that this film was like, it doesn't matter if we can do it, or we're not going to restrict ourselves. It doesn't matter if we get the R rated. It doesn't matter if we get the NC-17 movie rating. This is what this movie, Evil Dead Rise, needs to be effective. And by God, there is a lot of that in this movie where I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, how much gallons of blood did they just drench their actors in? Here's what I found very effective about Evil Dead Rise. I think the kids bring it in this film. I legitimately cared about each of these kids, the stakes that happen to them, just the intensity of this film as it revolves around kids. You actually feel that the kids are in danger from beginning to end. There isn't this thing where they have the plot armor because it's like, oh, they're kids and they won't kill kids. No, the first few scenes in the movie make it really obvious that people will die in this movie, and people very innocent will die, and people of a young age will die. And that just raises the stakes of this movie. This opening scene is really bloody, very disturbing, and it also has one of the greatest like opening credits. When the title card raises, it's literally one of the coolest things I've seen in a movie recently. I found it so effective. And what I liked about this is Evil Dead's been in a weird franchise for a little bit because as Bruce Campbell, the main actor who played Ash Williams, became more and more prolific in this series, or more and more prominent, I should say, not prolific, prominent in this series. Campbell is a very naturally cheesy actor. And so the film embraced his humor. This one has very dark sense of humor, and it has some really funny scenes in it. But it's not a comedy. This film is truly a horror film first. I would not describe this as a horror comedy. I would describe this as a horror thriller with some dark comedic elements sprinkled in throughout. I really like this. And the tone that this film sets from the beginning is perfect. And speaking of just tone, one of the things that does that so well is the atmosphere that director Lee Cronin captures in Evil Dead Rise. We are essentially in one apartment building the whole movie. And it works because this apartment building, we have a geographical feel for it. We understand the rooms that are in place. We have kind of a layout of this. So we kind of know where whenever one character is in one scene or one person is being chased, we all know where everything is happening. So the action feels fluid. We know what's going on. We never feel like there are just extra rooms that show up when something needs to happen or when a character needs to hide. We kind of know all the hiding spots of this room. They spend about 20 minutes setting up this Los Angeles apartment very well. And there's a way that Lee Cronin just films it where it feels run down. You really feel the atmosphere. And when we find the Book of the Dead, you really get that level of horror with it. So it's a very scary thing, especially when we hear the records that end up summoning the dead. This is all done to just really incredible effects. I mean, just truly some unnerving special effects here. Some truly nerving sound design. The sound that the monster makes is pretty frightening throughout. Just the look of it. Alyssa Sutherland, who plays the mother in this film, is absolutely terrifying. Just absolutely just a great committed leading villain performance or leading monster performance. She is so unnerving in this film, and she kind of is asked to play the Exorcist type character, a character possessed and trying to kill her family. It's really, the makeup on her is really good. How she contorts her body is pretty excellent. I have no criticism of Alyssa Sutherland's performance or really any of the main performances in this film. And like I said, watching this film, I was just so impressed by what they do. And this film is so well-paced. Evil Dead Rise is such a well-paced horror film. It is only 97 minutes long. The actual horror is probably only 70 of those 97 minutes. Maybe even less, maybe even closer to like 60. And I say this in the best possible way. This movie feels 2.5 hours because of the intensity of those 70 minutes. It never lets up. Once this film hits the 10, it never takes its foot off the gas. It is such an intense ride from the opening, which is maybe a 9, and then it calms down, and then it just gears forward, and it hits, the 10 is even broken in this. It doesn't just stay at a 10, it keeps going. The pace just keeps getting faster and more visceral, and more violent and more scary, and just more intensity throughout. And it's a pretty impressive magic trick that Lee Cronin is able to pull, that the brutality, the blood of this film, the guts of this film, just what happens, how this film's plot breaks down. It never feels redundant. It never feels cliched. It just feels true to this story that Lee Cronin is trying to tell. I found Evil Dead Rise to be a very worthwhile experience seeing it in theaters. I can't say I'm necessarily rushing out to see this movie again. There are images in this film that will never escape my mind. There are moments of this film that I don't necessarily think I want to relive. But for what Evil Dead Rise seeks to achieve, I think it achieves that in wonders. And for that reason, I am giving it 4 out of 5 stars here on the Beneverse. Anyway, that is my review of Evil Dead Rise. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe to the Beneverse movie channel. I will be having more reviews up soon. Thank you all for watching. Take care and bye-bye.